Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. So before I start with the Mutashabiyat series, I just thought to create a very short clip about the pattern recognition that I mentioned. So effectively, if you're not familiar with the pattern recognition concept, I mentioned that in the earlier clip, in the first clip, so be sure to check that out. So this clip would cover the concepts of pattern recognition very simply, because it's one of the powerful tools there are to sort of memorize. And Surah Rahman is one of the greatest surahs that sort of showcases that, because you have فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ repeated 31 times. So being familiar with the fact that you will have one ayat, for instance, over here, that would be فِيهِنَّ خَيْرَاتٌ حِسَانٌ فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. You'll have this ayat repeated after every one non-فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ ayat. So that's how I visualize this surah. And this surah has 78 ayats, and in all honesty, I think it just took me a day to memorize the 3 sides of a page. And so how you would sort of break it down in your mind is you would just tell yourself that you will have an ayat surrounded by فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ before and after, with the exception of 4 places. So the first place is the first batch of 12 ayats. So the first batch here hasn't got a فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. So you would have to see if you can remember these through other patterns. So for instance, in the first 4 ayats here you have علم القرآن, then you have an ayat, then you have علمه البيان. So علم القرآن and علمه البيان. So I just focus on علم and علمه. So the shorter version comes first. So that's how I sort of recalled it. So I would suggest perhaps reciting Ar-Rahman. When you know you're going to learn Surah Rahman, the first ayat is already easy. So Ar-Rahman, then علم القرآن, and then you can have خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. And then if you cover it up and try to actively recall the first 4 ayats, you can just say Ar-Rahman. And then if you make a mistake, and if you don't say علم القرآن, and if you say علمه البيان, then if you reveal the ayah and actively recognize, or look, well, it's علم القرآن, then your mind would go through a hypercorrective mode, and that would solidify the memory, and inshallah that would make a stronger memory. So the pattern there is the shorter version of the alphabets comes first, علم القرآن versus علمه البيان. So Ar-Rahman علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان. So the next 2 ayats have the alphabet sheen twice. So sheen once and sheen twice. So I know الشمس والقمر بحسبان comes alongside والنجم والشجر يسجدان, because the next one hasn't got a sheen. So that's another sort of mini pattern, if you like. Then والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط والأرض وضعها فيها والنخل والحب. Most of these ayats have the alphabet wow in front of them, with the exception of ألا تطغوا and with the exception of فيها. So that's another sort of pattern that I would tell myself. So if I make a mistake over here, I can backtrack and then just start from the very first one, for example, or just start here at Ash-Shams, or even start at the very top. But you don't want to backtrack too far ahead. So the pattern of Surah Rahman in memorizing it would be the first out of 12 ayats has not got a فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ, and then they are, so excluding this, you have 4 areas in the surah that has 2 ayats, then a فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ. So for example, and the rest of the surah is where you have 1 ayah followed by فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ, and then followed by an ayah followed by فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ. So let's cover some of this then. So for instance, those 4 areas where you have a set of 2 ayats followed by فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ are right at the very start, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. So you have the first set of 12 ayats, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ, and then the first set of 2 ayats is خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ صَلْصَالٍ كَالْفَخَّارِ وَخَلَقَ الْجَانَّ مِنْ مَارِجٍ مِنْ نَارٍ فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ. So notice there are 2 ayats. Then you have فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ. Then you have the one-to-ones, so you have Rabbul Mashriqayn, you have Rabbul Maghribin, فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ. And then your second set of 2 ayats followed by one فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ is مَرَزَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ يَلْتَقِيَانِ بَيْنَهُمَا. So when I recite مَرَزَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ يَلْتَقِيَانِ, I know I can't say فَبِأَيِّ آلَاء because there's a second ayat, right? So the second place where 2 ayats occur together before فَبِأَيِّ آلَاء is مَرَزَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ يَلْتَقِيَانِ بَيْنَهُمَا. And then you have يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان وله الجواب. And then where this ruku starts, كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام. That's the third place where you have a set of 2 ayats followed by فبأي آلاء. Okay, so the first place, just to recap, is you have خلق الإنسان وخلق الجان. That's the first place. The second place would be مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ. So when you read خلق الإنسان, you won't read فبأي آلاء. You would know that there is وخلق الجان afterwards. Then the second place is where you have مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان. Then the third place is at the start of the ruku here, and that is كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام. And then you have one-to-ones again. So for instance, you'll have سنفرغ لكم أيها الثقلان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. يا معشر الجن والإنس إن استطعتم أن تنفذوا من أقطار السماوات والأرض فانفذوا لا تنفذون إلا بسلطان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. يرسل عليكم شواظ من نار ونحاس فلا تنتصرون فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. So you'll have a one-to-one session throughout the whole surah. But there is a fourth place where you have 2 ayats, and that is right towards the end of the second ruku. And that is here. So you have هذه جهنم التي يكذب بها المجرمون يطوفون بينها وبين حميم آن. Then فبأي آلاء. So if you're going to sit down and memorize Surah Rahman, firstly know that you already know more than half the surah, because there are 31 repetitions of فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. So that is half of the surah pretty much. Secondly, the ayats are very small, and they're sort of very nicely symmetrical. They've got a very nice flow and rhythm. So memorizing Surah Rahman is incredibly easy. But also know that there are certain patterns within the surah that would help you in your memory. So for instance, there are 4 places where you have configurations of 2 ayats followed by فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ, compared with the rest of the surah, which is where you have 1-to-1 ratios of the فَبِأَيِّ آلَاء versus the non-فَبِأَيِّ آلَاء ayah. And I suppose there is one last observation that I made was right towards the end, this last ayah here. So you have تَبَارَكَ اسْمُ رَبِّكَ ذِي الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. Now I used to make this mistake a lot, because right here you have كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ. So you have ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ and ذِي الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ at the top and the bottom. And how I learned this was, if you look at this ayah closely, you have وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ. So when I recite wajhu, I know it's Rabbika Zul Jalali wal Ikram. Okay, and then versus the second time it says Tabaraka Asmu Rabbika Zil Jalali wal Ikram. So just sort of recognizing these small patterns would sort of help you in your recitation and memorizing journey, inshallah. So that is the summary of the pattern for memorizing Surah Rahman. And the first 12 is once you've recited the first sort of 12 ayats at least, sort of 10 to 12 times, you'll know that it's so easy. Even without the فَبِأَيِّ آلَاء, you would pick it up very quickly. And then you need to know that there are 4 areas where you have the ratio of 2-to-1 for the فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ ayah versus the non-فَبِأَيِّ آلَاء ayah. And then the last pattern here would be, as mentioned, is the وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ versus ذِي الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. And the last ruku here, there is another pattern actually. In the last pattern, in the last ruku, how I memorized this very quickly was that I visualized this whole page as a sandwiching of ayats. So for instance, you have a sandwiching of 3 ayats over here. So if you notice here, you have فِيهِمَا عَيْنَانِ فِيهِمَا عَيْنَانِ تَجْرِيَانِ. Okay, that's the top part. The middle part is over here. كَأَنَّهُنَّ الْيَاقُوتُ وَالْمَرْجَانُ فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ هَلْ جَزَاءُ مِن دُونِهِمَا. Okay, so this is the middle part from كَأَنَّهُنْ all the way down to here. But notice that you have a repetition here of فِيهِمَا عَيْنَانِ نَضَّاخَتَانِ. Okay, so the first portion of this ruku, because this ruku ends over here, so it starts just here. وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتَانِ. So here you have فِيهِمَا عَيْنَانِ تَجْرِيَانِ comes first, versus فِيهِمَا عَيْنَانِ نَضَّاخَتَانِ comes second, comes afterwards. And there are a set of 3 ayats with this فِيهِمَا. So you have the first one here, فِيهِمَا عَيْنَانِ. So you have فِيهِمَا عَيْنَانِ تَجْرِيَانِ فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. فِيهِمَا again, مِن كُلِّ فَاكِهَةٍ زَوْجَانِ. Versus over here, you have فِيهِمَا, you don't have the min. You have فِيهِمَا, you don't have the min and kulli. You have فِيهِمَا فَاكِهَةٌ وَنَخْلٌ وَرُمَّانٌ. Okay, so it's a shorter version of the ayat. So you have فِيهِمَا مِن كُلِّ فَاكِهَةٍ زَوْجَانِ in the first sort of earlier version, if you like. And then here further down in the page you have فِيهِمَا فَاكِهَةٌ وَنَخْلٌ وَرُمَّانٌ فَبِأَيِّ آلَاءِ رَبِّكُمَا تُكَذِّبَانِ. And then you have مُتَّكِئِينَ, which does come again here right towards the end. So مُتَّكِئِينَ عَلَى فُرُشٍ comes between the 3, whereas مُتَّكِئِينَ عَلَى رَفْرَفٍ comes after the second 3. So here you have فِيهِنَّ قَاصِرَاتُ الطَّرْفِ versus فِيهِنَّ خَيْرَاتٌ حِسَانٌ. So that's so just sort of categorizing the 3 ayats, I suppose. The first set of 3 ayats of فِيهِمَا and فِيهِنَّ with a muttaqi'in in the middle, versus the second set of فِيهِمَا عَيْنَانِ نَضَّاخَتَانِ فِيهِمَا and then فِيهِنَّ together, versus muttaqi'in comes after. Sort of helped me learn this very quickly, and inshallah I hope that brings benefit to you in your memory journey as well, and I hope that was of some benefit, inshallah. Okay, khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.